Hello, Singapore. I'm going to roll straight into this.
From 2014 to 2025, major platforms like Facebook, WhatsApp, and Fortnite have faced critical breaches. Zero-click spyware, AI phishing, and crypto scams are rampant. The Sandbox and Decentraland are not immune. Your data is at risk across the metaverse. Facebook. The 2014 Cambridge Analytica scandal exposed 533 million users' data. Personal information harvested and misused without consent. WhatsApp. Zero-click spyware attacks targeted journalists and activists. AI-powered phishing scams led to mass account takeovers. Instagram. Sophisticated phishing attacks using fraudulent login pages. AI-enhanced scams compromise accounts at unprecedented scale. Fortnite 2018 breach exploited platform vulnerabilities. Hackers accessed user accounts and stole credit card data. The Sandbox 2023 phishing attack compromised employee accounts through social engineering. User assets put at risk. Decentraland 2024 scammers created fake mana token airdrops. Users tricked into revealing wallet credentials and losing crypto assets. So the critical question is AI being developed to safeguard your metaverse identity or to exploit it?
So, welcome. And that video highlights what we're talking about today. Ori, in his opening keynote address, mentioned the importance of privacy as we build experiences in the metaverse and as AI becomes more prolific in the entire ecosystem. Alvin, who had the second keynote of the event, also mentioned the importance of agency and autonomy for users and how we can be empowered by these technologies or these technologies can be abused. Today, what I talk about is deep diving a little more into what's going on and how to build a foundational infrastructure around safety and the way we use these platforms in the future. So let's get straight into the data. A lot of research that I've done over the last few years revealed some of these data points. 67% of examined metaverse platforms have critical authentication flaws. User access, login, identity access management, things like that. 89% of store identifiable metadata on public blockchains is vulnerable. So the interesting thing about that is whenever you're using a store on any application platform to purchase an app, whether it's VR or Google Play or anything like that, it's vulnerable. Somebody else can see that data if they know how to get into it. 49% of metaverse data flows lack appropriate disclosure and privacy policies. Now, how many of us genuinely know what's in the privacy policy of the apps that we use and the companies that we get products and services from? A lot of us actually don't read that. Two out of 3 platforms are vulnerable. That's what this data shows us. Users are in the dark about policies, and most of the platforms do not disclose the data or how they use it. Give me a minute here while I get hacked. All right. That was just a little entertaining thing I did when I was creating the presentation as an eye-opener for people, that with AI, you can be hacked in seconds on any platform if you're not watching your security. It's an extremely important thing that we often forget about when we're dealing with experiential content. Everybody wants to dive into the experience, the device, the software, the engagement, but then they forget about, are we setting ourselves up for vulnerability and risk? So moving on to how they collect data. My book recently came out. It investigates a personal story that I tell of my own mom whose identity got compromised on Meta and Facebook. Cost a lot of money for her over the years. Over 2 or 3 years, she got sort of out of pocket by several hundreds of thousands of dollars, and our family had to deal with that crisis over 2 years to try and basically stop the bleeding from all of the financial loss from bad actors. Now, getting into more of the data, we're no longer discussing traditional surveillance or methodologies that have been used in the past by cybercrime and cybercriminals. Now we're looking at a data landscape where genetic, biometric, haptic, retinal, voice, and expression are all being monitored and are part of the data collection specifically enabled by wearable devices. So imagine the amount of data being collected on us as we use these platforms. It's no longer a case of having a password or something that you think protects you when you are being biologically monitored. So users as passive data points, and this is what I'm trying to build on in this talk. The Metaverse platforms can track your interaction, as we all know. Behavior and emotion are part of that interaction. On nearly every platform, the intent is predictive. That's the business model. So the companies collect this data so that they can predict your responses. What will this user do next? What will they buy next? How do we turn them into a subscribed consumer? And all of you, I bet in the last 3 or 4 years, have been super exposed to the amount of subscription services that there are on social, on streaming, on gaming, and every other platform that you can imagine that's available electronically. That is the business model, and the reason they have that business model is so they can monetize it. With AI systems, this data is being analyzed, and everything coming from our devices. And sorry, I am reading off the script because I had to revise it yesterday. Everything coming off our devices leads to what I call surveillance capitalism. Data points being collected so that the companies and the people who control that data know more about you than you know about yourself sometimes. Now, that's a scary reality, but it's the reality that we face today. We can safely conclude from that the collection of data points is leading to the erosion of our autonomy. Now, how do we feel about that as human beings? When technology is so pervasive that it erodes our own autonomy and control of how we work with applications, devices, and data. Moving on. This brings me to the topic of how we use AI in terms of good and bad. Let's look at the pros and cons of this, right? Why does privacy matter? How can AI be good for us and bad for us at the same time? And it's the same with any technology or XR platforms. We're thinking about, well, here are all the good things. Let's look at the experiences. Let's look at the communication, the ability to share with friends and connect and do all the fun stuff. Well, yes, that's the good thing about all experiences. Social, metaversal, device-based, it doesn't matter gaming, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. Those are the common traits of engagement and enjoyment. But then the bad things are, well, like I said, what are we doing with the data? Who's controlling that data? What are they using it for? And how is it purposed against us? Now, I want to take a poll here quickly around the room. In the room, show of hands, who reads the privacy policy of every app that they download on any device that they use? Big flat zero. I love it. Don't worry. You're the majority. We are the majority. We don't read the fine print. And companies know this, so they put in complex legal narratives in the fine print so that they know how to manipulate the data that we send them. Legal narratives that protect them, not you. So how does that make you feel? You're probably sitting there asking yourself, aren't I the end user? Shouldn't they be protecting me? I'm paying them for a service. Well, that's not how it works. They protect their own backsides, and that's what they call compliance. You ever had a call to a helpline or a help desk in some major service that you use, even a bank or something, and then the first operator that comes on that call ends up telling you a whole list of things about, oh, I have to tell you this, this, and this, and you spend 15 minutes on that call not solving the problem that you actually called for, but listening to them read off a script. Now, do you know why they do that? Compliance. This is how our company, at the nth level, at the lowest common denominator of a call center, manages risk. And funnily enough, even in the call center, the data flow and the risk management flow goes right up to C-level. So if you ask top executives around the world, the #1 job that they do as a C-level operator, whether they're chief of strategy, CFO, chief of risk, CEO, it doesn't matter what C-level job they have, risk is the thing that they have to manage to show profitability to their board and to show how they safeguard their company against anything that may start fires. So on the VR/AR front, the majority of people do not read the fine print, and companies deliberately manipulate that and obscure the legal complexity of that. The business model is driving the surveillance capitalism. Often VR and AR devices are sold at a loss. I'll move on to this in a second. Oh, that works really good. So VR and AR devices are sold at a loss, and companies recoup the monetization of the devices through the use of selling data. And whose data are they selling? They're selling your data, my data. And who are they selling it to? Anyone that will pay a price to buy it. Data brokers, advertisers, you name it, they'll sell it. Anyone used Windows 11 lately? Anyone seen how shocking the advertising is on Windows 11 when you pull up your start menu? It's pretty bad. And you've seen complaints on it all over YouTube and influencers everywhere saying, quit Windows 11. Well, where do you think they're getting all that advertising content from? They're feeding in the back end of their operating system, they're feeding off the data that you type in every day to sell you things. All right, moving on. We're no longer consumers of product and service in the digital landscapes that we use. Streaming services, gaming services, AR, VR, XR, Metaverse services, we are no longer consumers of these things. We are being analyzed as the product. That changes the dynamic of how we see ourselves in the future of the world that we live in, right? So, as we sort of look at this, let's look at the architecture. Let's look at where we are and where we're moving to. The architecture paradox is this: AI and XR can be used for good and bad. The data represents the architecture, and systems like blockchains do not automatically guarantee data protection, privacy, and especially platforms collect enormous amounts of personal data, as you know. AI is currently being built on a foundation of insecurity. A foundation of insecurity. So we're building apps, we're building OpenAI and Copilot, and all these big tech companies are putting AI out there and saying, like, AI is the next best thing since sliced bread. But here's the thing, when you hear in the news, and this happened just last week in the United States, a company lost $2 million of intellectual property data by using Microsoft Copilot. 1 week. And this is happening constantly, but no one's talking about it. So enterprise, listen up. Business, listen up. Yes, AI is great if you understand how to use it for productivity, but if you don't protect it, it's not going to help you. It's going to be bad for your business. As I move forward, when we look at the paradox, centralized, good governance, yes. Decentralized, good architecture. Closed source versus open source systems, consolidated IT and cloud infrastructure versus personal computing. So the battle we have in the computing environment today is basically cloud architecture and data centers, especially in North America, you've seen this, versus personal computing. A lot of us over the last 30 or 40 years have gotten used to personal computing, and we all have a cell phone, and that's a personal computing device. But where it's going is all of the compute products are now, especially in the US, are now being consolidated into data center environments, which means subscription-based computing in the future, infrastructure as a service. That's kind of an example of centralized versus decentralized. Decentralized is more ownership, centralized is consolidation. When we look at the other aspects of it, centralized means poor governance because there's too much power and control. Big tech can influence big government through lobbying. Big government will listen to the money. So where's the consumer in all this? Where do we stand? Well, we don't have a voice. And hey, one voice right here. Decentralized architecture can often mean poor design. We see this in examples of the Linux operating system, for example, over 20 years. And Linux is growing. By all means, it is growing. But I will say that it struggled over 2 decades to catch up to other operating systems like Windows. And one of the reasons is because when you look at the flavors of Linux, there's like 10 dozen different types of Linux out there. So what do you do? What do you pick, right? So I'm going to move into a little more depth. AI functions today by leveraging data for profits by big tech companies. Machine learning can process amounts of human data, making inferences about us that are highly impossible to ignore and highly predictive. AI-powered tracking systems can follow your digital footprint across platforms and reconstruct your identity by using your content. Outcomes are controlled and determined by whoever controls the deployment. So have a think about that. Now you know why NVIDIA and OpenAI are building the data centers and the infrastructure. Because if they control the deployment of the technology and they make you the consumer of that, they control your data and therefore they control what you can do with it. It's a scary reality, but is it? It is a reality in North America, and in the global landscape, I'm not sure how it's unfolding right now, but it's certainly something the world needs to think about and know about. Last point, outcomes are controlled by the big tech companies right now in AI development, and that'll bleed into XR development as well. AI governance is not about technology. It's about policy and best practice. So no one's talking about policy and best practice like we are talking about gadgets and apps and devices and experiences. We see the big companies come to conferences like this and go, woo-woo, look at how bells and whistles this is. Don't laugh, it's true. We've seen it for a decade, we've seen it for 2. But let's talk about realities. Well, what's the back end that powers that front end? And what is it doing to us? As we move forward, oh, hold on, I'll go back for a second. User empowerment, so, okay, let's talk about some of the good stuff for a second. While companies are doing all this, what is a model for us to improve upon that? The multi-layered protection framework looks at a model of fixing some of the data mess that we've created for ourselves and what the companies are doing to power themselves. User empowerment, governance, and technical. So as you can see, building the devices and the infrastructure is this bit here. It should be it's important, I'm not saying it isn't, but it's actually the lowest priority in terms of human needs. So if we were to put this up against like a chart, like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this would be the way it would shape out. The technical is on the bottom. The important stuff is the governance and the user empowerment. And when we get to the blue, when we get to the user empowerment, when we are in control of our own source, of our own data, of our own digital identity, then we can be proactive and empowered to use it in experiences the way we want to. How do we get there? I have no idea at the moment. But we start by advocating for consumer rights. That's where we start. That's the paradigm. Oh, sorry, wrong one. All right. So from exploitation to empowerment, what I'm advocating for when I talk about privacy and security is privacy by design from the outset. That is fundamentally important that when we design experiences, applications, and devices moving forward in the XR industry or any technology industry, we must design privacy from the outset, from the beginning of the process. This is how we're going to protect our end customer, and this is why it's important. And there are companies that do this. If you look at Anthropic and Claude, it's a great example. Legal protections and best practice. That's the last sort of point of governance, right? It's like we need to encourage businesses and governments to get on board and bring in sort of the legislation that we need to govern these things. Self-sovereign identity control and credentials. So self-sovereign identity control and credentials means that the power shifts from companies to users about how we manage our digital identities. It is fundamental to the topic because right now the companies manage it and data brokers abuse it. And when your data is sold online, in North America alone, 600 data brokers exist to sell your data to sources that you don't even know. I don't know how it is globally, but I heard the same practice is global. So shift power to users, enforce transparency, and have adaptive privacy controls. That is my presentation. Thank you for having me, Singapore.